Welcome. You've clicked yourself onto Three Guys and an iPad, the only mortgage-focused podcast certain not to be a super spreader event. I'm Brian Rieger, and joined by my friend and partner at Content Beacon, Rick Grant today. Mr. Grant, how are you?
Doing well, Brian. It's good to see you as always. Looking forward to this show. I've been looking forward to this one for a while.
Well, as have I, and I think, and of course, Rick knows both of our guests very well, as do I. We've worked with them in many capacities, and I have a feeling Kevin knows them too. And speaking of Kevin, we wouldn't be Three Guys without Kevin Breeland of Amplify Credit Union in Austin, Texas. Mr. Breeland, how are you this fine day?
Doing well today. Thank you for asking, Brian. I'm looking forward to the podcast. You know, what you don't know is Phil promised after the podcast that he was going to get me casted for some curmudgeon old white guy movie roles so I could retire from mortgage lending.
Well,
so since it's been the role I've been working on my entire life, I'm ready for it.
Well, that leads me into our introductions. For those who don't know, Mr. Hall is also a horror movie aficionado. So he may have a monster role scheduled for you there, Kevin.
I can do that.
All right. This is the point in the podcast where I make our shameless plug for Content Beacon, the only and leading B2B content marketing agency to serve the mortgage industry. If you'd like to learn more about Content Beacon, or if you have some guest ideas, some topic ideas for this little podcast, maybe you'd like to be on the show, you'd like to share some thoughts, we're right there on the show notes there, or just email Rick at contentbeacon.com or me at brian@contentbeacon.com. And now, on with the show.
And welcome to our From the Field segment. This is where we talk to the players who are actually out there in the industry, making the industry work. Our guest today absolutely qualifies for that. He's Ty Kern. He's Executive Managing Director of National Production at SunWest Mortgage Company Incorporated, Newport Beach, California. And in his current role, he's creating an atmosphere that allows loan officers to successfully do more loans using the company's systems, technology, and culture. Ty, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start by setting the stage for us. Tell us about SunWest and where you play in the industry.
Yeah, so SunWest is a multi-channel lender. We were recently named, quite proud to be named for one of the top 50 best mortgage companies to work at. We were named in the top 100 mortgage companies in terms of volume. SunWest has been around for 40 years, was established in 1980. It's family owned, still is and always has been. We've been direct with the agencies, Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, since the mid 80s or so. We've led the markets, many different niche markets, from reverses to 203Ks to one-time construction closes. Predominantly, SunWest has always been multi-channel, done, traditional retail, consumer direct, wholesale, correspondent. We also are a full servicer. But 2 years ago when I joined SunWest, it was specifically to help build out the distributed retail and some of the consumer direct channels for them.
Very good. Now I want to ask you what has happened to the company in terms of growth during this recent crisis. But before I get there, I want to talk to you about your leadership style, because in your position, that's really what you bring. You're setting the table for all of the people that work under you. Have you seen your leadership style change as we've made our way through this crisis? And if so, how?
Yeah, no question. I was always of the mindset prior to the crisis that most meetings, not all, but most, were a waste of time. And I was always very poignant in my meetings, more one-on-one in nature and less in large groups. And I can tell you, once the crisis hit, I think the level of anxiety was so high and everyone was now at home. We've got this new wonderful tool in Zoom where you can actually get together effectively in a group. And we began, which is completely against, my normal style. I was more about getting things done and having more little, what I would call sort of SWAT team kind of, or special force kind of meetings, and then executing. And I can tell you that it just felt to me like people needed to see each other more often and talk to each other more often. So we began to really meet daily as a national group team. So we're talking about several hundred people on a call via Zoom. We created, a crisis motto that that I would read off and recite to the start of every call. And we met daily, I would say, for the first 6 weeks. And then as we started to come out there's a little more certainty, a little less anxiety, we scaled it back to 3 times a week, and now we're at 2 times a week. And as the COVID crisis gave way to the civil crisis that we find are justifiably crisis that we find ourselves in today. Twice a week is still a lot, but if you would have asked me if any organization that I was running that I would be meeting nationally on a level that often, I would say you're crazy. There'd absolutely be no reason to do that. And now I don't think I'll ever go back to a monthly sort of recap meeting about what's going on and where we're going. I think our culture has gotten closer. I think people, myself included, needed that much of a touch point. And I think something worthy of noting, Rick, is, my monthly meetings were attended at about maybe a 60% level, because as you know, salespeople are on the road and doing their things. And my dailies that went to 3 times a week to twice a week are like 80%. 80% attendance every single meeting, which is crazy, which means obviously it's working.
Yes, that's and you're exactly right. That is so contrary to what our popular understanding of the workplace culture is. But what a fantastic outcome. Now, you mentioned that you probably won't go back. What benefits, what tangible benefits of this are you seeing that you want to make sure you maintain?
For me, I think culturally we're closer, which is important, especially in a time like this with this much anxiety, both personally and professionally. And it's odd, our business is doubling during this. Everyone's at home. We're not in perfect working environments, especially our operational partners. So just, the culture of closeness and more understanding, and I think it's created a greater, a more empathetic and a more gracious environment. There's also a lot to discuss, and I think there's a level of transparency now where people are showing up to the call expecting to receive information about what's going on, and there is more news around the industry and just the work part and how the crises we find ourselves in impact what we do as lenders. And it's just but culturally to get closer in a time like this, I think is super important. And I always tell my leaders that especially when you're as deliberately different as SunWest is, and as we are trying to be and want to be, it's really important to have true believers. And I feel like there's a lot more true believers on our team right now, even though that we're in trying circumstances, both personally and professionally, than there was before. And what was funny is everything was a lot more smoothly run 3 or 4 months ago, and somehow we're closer and more understanding now. And it has to be, I think, a higher touch point and a greater conversation and getting face to face. I got to tell you, when I go to once a week, I'm going to miss seeing all those faces, every day and every other day. So
that makes a lot of sense. Wow, what a story! Now, I heard you mention an increase in volume. Unlike many businesses that try to improve culture and then look for signs, in our business, you can tell when you're winning And you guys are really winning right now. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, a lot of it is just the planning and the decisions that we've made prior to, this, sort of gold rush kind of situation with where interest rates are at. I think we made a lot of decisions on what we wanted, salespeople to do versus what we wanted, done for them, or what we wanted technology or workflow to do. So we were prepared. The owner of our company, Pavan Agarwal, CEO, has invested in the people and invested in the infrastructure, invested in the technology and the workflow, and literally has no ego. And it takes that, and it took a lot of skill and a lot of capital to get through what happened as the markets were trying to figure out, what was going on in March and April. And I would say, the government stepped up to stabilize the markets, and particularly the bond market, which sets interest rates, as you know, and the Fed was buying, billions of dollars worth of mortgage-backed securities, as well as 10-year Treasury notes, all maturities of Treasuries. And at the end of the day, that with Pavan's skill and our cap markets team skill allowed us to really come through the crisis, virtually unscathed. And we had a solid price every single day. Lots of lenders were pulling in and out and doing crazy things, and we had solid pricing. And the other thing is that many lenders narrowed their credit box significantly, and for many good reasons. But at the end of the day, we not only just having 40 years experience and serving the communities that we serve, we were able to leave our credit box wide open, and being stable in price, leaving your credit box wide open when the rest of the world has kind of swum a different, gone a different direction, really allowed us to, we'd already doubled from the year before by March, and we doubled again, and we likely will double again before the end of this year.
Holy cow. Well played, Ty. Really, really well played. Now, if our viewers want to find out more about SunWest, or if they want to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
You could send them directly to me on my cell phone. It's probably the best way to reach me. Just text or call me, and that's 714-914-5507. I respond really quickly to texts. If somebody wants to have a conversation with me, or we can do that.
Very good. And the website we should send them to, what's the best one? We have, it kind of depends on what their needs are. We manage several brands, right? So if it's somebody that's looking for a loan, like an online situation, then I would go to a brand. Lowrates.com is our online. And then SunWest, SWMC.com would be where if you're looking for like an in-market loan officer or a branch somewhere. Mm-hmm. And what about people who may want to try to get on your team?
That would be call me or Meg.
Very good.
Sure.
Very
Absolutely.
good.
And
Ty,
we are actively adding recruits every day. So.
Yeah. Ty, I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Rick, thank you for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about the way we receive information, and especially in the mortgage industry. We've had a lot of change in how we receive and how we report the news, and it's no different for the mortgage trades and financial service publications. So today, we're very lucky to be joined by two of the top journalists and reporters, editors in the mortgage industry. Our first guest is coming to us today from the Big Apple. He is the originations editor of National Mortgage News, which is an Arizona publication. He's been with NMN since May of 1990, and during his stint there, he served as the editor of Broker Magazine and Origination News. Prior to that, he was the associate editor of the Airport Press in Jamaica, New York, and a reporter for This Week publications on Long Island. He's also a past president of the New York Financial Writers Association. I will also tell you that he's a fine umpire and a terrible fantasy baseball GM. Welcome, Brad Finkelstein.
Hey, how you all doing? Well, I did finish, I think, second once
You did.
In that league. And umpiring is now retired umpire.
Probably the safest move these days.
These days, yes.
Well,
but hi all.
I know. Hey, happy to have you here, Brad. Really honored to have you. And our second guest is equally well known and honored in the industry, and he's coming to us from lovely Fairfield, Connecticut, in the Nutmeg State today. He is a former UN-based reporter for Fairchild Broadcast News. He's the author of 9 books, the host of the SoundCloud podcast, The Online Movie Show, co-host of the WAPJ FM talk show Nutmeg Chatter, and a writer with credits in the New York Times, New York Daily News, Hartford Courant, Wired, The Hills Congress blog, and Profit Confidential. And his real estate finance related writing has included pieces in the ABA Banking Journal, Secondary Marketing Executive, Servicing Management, Mortgage Orb, Progress in Lending, National Mortgage Professional, Housing Wire, and you'll find him these days, amongst other places, at the M Report and DS News. Mr. Hall, and of course, as we mentioned, what you don't know about Phil, but you're about to, is that he has also, I believe, directed and produced several horror movies, correct?
I just acted in them. I'm an actor in movies, including the Bikini Bloodbath trilogy. Yep. I actually won the Best Supporting Actor award for Bikini Bloodbath Car Wash.
Outstanding. Well, check that out if you can.
Okay. And you want to know something also? I am so damn jealous of Brad because when I got out of college in the 1980s, one of the first jobs I applied for was airport press, and they didn't hire me.
Mm-hmm. They hired Brad.
I think Brad got the job that I should have gotten. Because of
Well, we're going to work that out over the course of this podcast. I promise, gentlemen. Phil and Brad both, welcome to the show today. And let's jump in. And again, these guys are truly, and as a PR guy, I'm telling you, these guys are journalists. They hold the journalistic standard. We're going to talk about that a little bit. That's why they're here today. So let's throw this toss-up out to both of you, and whoever wants to jump in first can do so. You've both been in the game for quite some time now. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the way news is reported, generally speaking, and in particular, how we're reporting mortgage and real estate related news?
Want to go first, Brad? Or should
I'll go. Well, the biggest change, and Rick is a former colleague of mine twice over at the various ownerships we have gone through at National Mortgage News. Is that National Mortgage News, when I started National Mortgage News 30 years ago, it was a 39 times a year publication. Eventually went to 53 issues a year, then down to 50. Then after all the big upheaval between journalism and in the financial space, we became a 12-month a year, 13 issue a year, 12 monthly issues, 1 special issue magazine, and now we're a 9 times a year magazine. But because of that shift, the other shift that happened was about 15 years ago, is we pretty much became a daily website. So before it started out, like, all right, stories need to be in by this date. You have time to report them. Now it's more of a case of, I'm here, it's daily, and need writing pretty much every day, at least 1 story a day, larger features, once again, and that's probably the biggest change. Really, there's with that daily focus, kind of that lack of timeliness in terms of having to write stuff. Like, I knew every Thursday I had to have this, that, and what else in. With the monthly magazines, I knew I had to have by this date, this, that, and whatever else in. Now it's more, especially with the longer features, it's more of a rolling deadline. There are like daily articles, and from my end, that's the biggest change. And correspondingly, not blaming Rick or Brian or on this one, but at times the mortgage industry is like not the quickest to respond to. Like, I need to speak to someone today. I can get you somebody 3 days from now, but that at times can be a little bit of a that's a little bit of a hassle. Whereas before, yeah, I can talk to somebody 3 days from now.
Well, I'll chime in on that, Brad. It used to be as a flack, we were taught, generally speaking, don't call a reporter or editor in the morning. They're in their meetings, and then the sacred deadline will be sometime late afternoon. And if it's a weekly or that sort of thing, wait till the end of the week. And that's changed now. And I don't know how many times I've heard, I've finally stopped following that standard to some degree. I don't know how many times I've heard including you guys, Brian, I'm always on deadline. So that, the sacred deadline is gone. It's just, as you said, rolling, right?
Yes.
No. Well, Phil, tell us some of what you've seen out there in recent years. How has the game changed?
Well, I don't know how your audience much they know about the publishing industry because they're coming from real estate finance, but publishing industry is very different from real estate finance because when reporters come into the field, they don't need to be taking licensing tests either at a state or federal level. They don't even need to have taken courses in school on business or real estate or economics. They're just basically thrown into the industry and told go write stories. The problem with this, particularly today, is that a lot of the publications, both within the mortgage industry and the wider industries as well, it's not unique to mortgage or real estate finance, they prefer to get reporters who are just out of school because they are the least expensive to hire. And it doesn't really matter whether they are good reporters or bad reporters. As long as they are cheap and they're not going to rock the boat, they're going to be taken in. And this creates quality control problems. You may notice this in some of the publications, certainly not mine and certainly not Brad's, of course, but the other ones out there, that a lot of the writing looks suspiciously like cut and paste press releases, and that's because it is. There's not a lot of original reporting going into this coverage. And I've been in situations where we've worked with young people in their early 20s who, quite frankly, are just so incompetent that almost everybody in the company has to work with them to get very basic articles up to a professional level, which in the long run isn't really cost effective. Even though you're paying these young people peanuts, you're getting yourself severe case of acid reflux having to polish their work when instead of hiring seasoned business professionals, and at this point in time, you don't even need to have anybody in a particular market. You could hire business writers from anywhere in the country thanks to Zoom.
Phil, this is more of a recent development, do you think, the last couple of years, or are we going this way a while? I noticed.
I've been seeing this for a number of years. I saw this at one of my earlier publications. I had edited 2 magazines, which are no longer around, and I had edited a certain website, which you had mentioned, which is now a shadow of itself, and that's how they operated. And I'm aware of other publishing companies, both in the space and also in the general B2B media, where they're not looking for the best and the brightest, they're looking for the youngest and the cheapest. And the quality control in the articles in B2B journalism, I think, has deteriorated dramatically over the past decade or so because of this.
Well, and you mentioned cut and paste journalism, Phil. It's PR 101. Make sure you write your news release as closely to the style of the publication as possible. The best of them get pasted in first. It's it's a win for the PR industry every time it pops in on the dark side here, but I understand where you're coming from as well. I'm going to stay with you for a second here, Phil. Let's look at the other side. We talked about the production, the reporting of the news and whatnot. What, if anything, is different about the way the industry consumes mortgage or financial services related news and information right now? How they use it, how they process it, how they perceive it. Once upon a time, you'd see executives getting on an airplane, going to a conference with 3 or 4 trade pubs in hand. They'd catch up on their reading. Not anymore. But what are you seeing out there? How has that changed?
Well, there's, quite frankly, there's too much out there. And it's always surprised me with the mortgage space that we have such a glut of media outlets covering this space. I would have expected there would be a somewhat more of a Darwinian experience where the weakest would fall by the wayside. That hasn't happened. In fact, a lot of the weakest are still covering the industry. Whether or not they're making money off of it, I can't say. I'm somewhat suspicious that they're not. But I think a lot of people in the industry, they're not looking for the big, thick newspapers. I mean, I started my career in the mid 80s, and I remember when American Banker used to come out, it actually would rival something like Barron's or Investors Business Daily because they were so thick and there were so many articles in it. But now with the internet, you're not waiting for the newspaper to come in the mail. The news is being bombarded at you every hour. There is no news cycle anymore. Every minute is the news cycle, and whoever gets there first is the one who's going to be getting the most eyeballs. And for the publications where I've been working, whenever we would have breaking news, it was always an adrenaline rush because we were the ones to get that out first.
Right. I do remember that, and Rick will remember this as well. I got my start after being a very short-lived attorney with a small company in Ohio called October Research Corporation, which produced the Title Report and a few other. I was not a journalist there. I did lots of other things involving marketing and conferences and whatnot. But anytime a breaking story came across, it was pretty much all hands on deck. Now, it was not a big company at the time, maybe 15 to 20 folks. Mr. Grant worked with me there as well. He was one of the journalists, of course. But Rick, you remember this too, don't you? Joe Casa would come across the floor and everybody was at work trying to be the first one to report the story.
Oh, I remember that very well. Brian. But even back then, it bothers me sometimes that you can't go as deep as you want when you're just trying to break news, be the first one out there. But it's all about eyeballs now a lot of times. Because we got these websites, and that's a lot of the way that these publications are making their money. And that's one thing, Phil, that I thought when you were talking about the changes in the industry. Publications are under intense pressure now to make their bottom lines work. And they don't have advertising like they used to have in the old days. So I see a lot of them cutting back. But you guys, both of you in particular, I see good, meaty stories coming out, well documented with good sources. I'd like to know when you approach a story and you know your publication's under pressure and they want you to post, just get it up there, get it online. What are the standards you guys use to make sure that when you're finished with a story and you file that story, you're proud of it?
Well, that's kind of, I don't know if I can explain it in words. It's more of a feeling. I do like to have, when I can, have multiple sources. Sometimes it's just not going to happen. And it's kind of hard because you're trying to be quick and you're trying to be good, and being quick and good it's difficult. But you know what? I like for the quick stories, and a lot of opening daily stuff is quick hit stories. I do like, and 30 years, I know a lot about the mortgage business. So I do try and bring some of that stuff to the basic stories. It's not just enough to say, and I don't write this story, but I do help with it a bit at times. The weekly rates from Freddie Mac. It's enough to say, rates went up this week, but maybe throw a little bit in and throw in some background there. And we try to do that here across all of our writers. Try to do that here. Throw in some background data about why this happened, not just it happened. And as Phil said, sometimes you can't help it. You have to get it out there quickly, and sometimes that stuff doesn't. Some background information sometimes doesn't get in there. But more to the point of what Rick was saying here, a lot of attention by management to SEO, search engine optimization, email rates, opens and click-throughs and so forth. And personally, I'm a capitalist somewhat.
You have to be to work in this industry, Brad. Come on.
But I understand these things. I understand the need for them because you can write the best journalism in the world, but if nobody's reading it, you've wasted your time. I think we're all enough in this room here to remember The National.
Sure.
Had some of the best sports journalists, Lupica, the football guy from Sports Illustrated, other people like that. Some of the best sports journalists, some of the best sports writing there was. And it lasted about a year, a little bit over a year maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can have the best, but at the end of the day, yeah, you have to not just have the best, you also have to appeal to the readership.
Eyeballs and clicks.
Eyeballs and clicks. That's kind of the mantra these days, as opposed to what we used to do. And Rick spent a few Saturdays in September with me at National Mortgage News when we had the 100-page plus issues coming out before the annual MBA conference every year, where it's just more like, get it. We don't care what it looks like. Just get the story in. You have to do 14 more, and we have to do it by this. And I will say some of those issues were the fun issues because we're not just writing about mortgages. We're writing about things like, well, this rock band's going to be appearing at the show, and there's going to be this party, and you could do this this year in Chicago, things like that.
Well,
so that's, yeah.
Brad, you made a point in there. I want to transition here a little bit. You and Phil both have been around the industry some time, and it took me 2 years to even be able to fake that I understood anything about it. And I like to think I have some semblance of understanding now, but you guys have seen it all, and you have the bonus of talking to lots of different participants. So I'm going to start with you, but I want to hear from Phil as well on this. You've both seen a lot, but in this, the oddest year yet, what kinds of changes have you seen in the industry? And this doesn't have to be related to journalism, just from what you've seen in the industry. How many changes that have been made because of the pandemic that do you think will be permanent, or at least kind of lead to major changes down the road?
That's kind of because one thing I've ever figured out about the mortgage industry is nothing is always new. I recently commented on this on social media. Work from home. Everybody remembers a company called Carteret Mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Carteret Mortgage was a mortgage brokerage / net branch operation in the 80s or so, 90s or so. 80s a little too early for me. 90s. And their thing was, well, you're a loan officer for us. You're basically working out of your house if we can get away with it. I mean, I think there may be some states where they weren't allowed to, state licensing, branch licensing laws. So work from home is not new in the mortgage industry. Now, we've had talk about remote online notarization, e-closings, e-mortgages, and this has been going back better part of a decade.
Or two.
Yeah.
Now there seems to be more acceptance of it. States are moving towards permanent acceptance. Right now, a lot of it's temporary. States are moving towards permanent acceptance of these acts. I think e-closings will be a more accepted way of doing business. I'm not exactly sure that it's going to stay at the current levels. I have a feeling You are going to see some companies decide that they need to retrench, mostly for their own security purposes. And until they get a better understanding, they're kind of forced into this now. But once they have the time to try and maybe get a better handle on it, better understanding, they may retrench for a little bit, maybe take it off the table for a little while. Most will probably go back eventually to doing these things. But once again, a lot of this is we're being pushed. We're all being pushed off a cliff towards this stuff right now. And if there's a chance to grab a midair parachute on some of this and maybe slow down once we can, once things quote unquote normalize, then I have a feeling we might see some retrenchment on that. I'm even like, I'm not one of those people who's going to say, yeah, we're all going to work from home after this ends, because at some point things are going to swing back and people are going to decide, you know what, working from home isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Interesting. Well, Phil, what about you? What's the biggest change, or what's likely to be the longest lasting change from some of our adaptation to the virus?
Honestly, I don't think there's going to be any, because once the virus is behind us, people are not going to be interested in being in a little box. They want to be with people. And that's why we've had so much problems during the course of this year with people ignoring Dr. Fauci and his ever-shifting warnings about how to protect yourself. People want to be out with their friends. They want to be with their families. They want to be at the beach. They want to be at the amusement park. They don't want to be sitting in front of the computer all day. And certainly people in a professional environment and people who thrive on person-to-person contact, which is what mortgage banking and, for that matter, the real estate broker business is all about. I think if there's going to be any big change coming, it's going to be if we were to have this conversation 5 years or 10 years from now, we'd be talking about a much smaller industry, and that's not because the competition is eating each other, because there's going to be fewer people in the industry. The average age of a loan officer, I believe, is 54, and the industry has done a dismal job bringing in new people. I know that MBA and NAMB and all of the associations have been trying to recruit young people to come in, and it really is not at a level where it should be. We're seeing a lot of, maybe the older folks will be staying on because, quite frankly, you can't retire on Social Security at 65 anymore. But eventually you're going to have a new wave coming in, and right now we just have a new trickle. And I think that, more than anything, is the industry's Achilles heel.
Well, interesting. And Phil, I want to stay with you now for a moment here. I'm going to jump over a little bit, but I think there will be some overlap. And we've seen kind of, in our industry, a very slow emergence of content marketing. In other industries, it's been out there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years now. But it seems the mortgage industry is starting to adopt it a little bit. And of course, the lines get blurred there. And I know you've dabbled in the dark side of marketing and PR a little bit, although you...
I didn't dabble. I ran my own agency for 10 years.
I was trying to be kind. I was trying not to indict you, but okay. So Phil knows his marketing and PR just as well as journalism. We like to joke in this industry that the light side's the journalism and the dark side is, of course, us PR hacks, but flacks. Phil, do journalists and publications perceive content marketing as a threat? It's trying, in some ways, it's emulating journalism. It's emulating the reporting of a story in news, but it is marketing. It is taking you in a direction. There's no doubt about it. Its job is not to be fair and balanced, but rather to be credible. And of course, there's a big difference. So tell me a little bit about what maybe you think about content, or how you think the industry is taking it on, and how do you think it's going to change the way news is reported as we go forward, especially in our industry?
I think the real problem is not so much from the journalists about worrying about competition, but within the media companies, the sales and marketing executives who are seeing content marketing as the challenge. A lot of the publications within this industry have sponsored content, and they've been pushing that very heavily as a source of income, and rightfully so, because they're not getting print advertising, and they're certainly not making money from conferences this year.
This year, yeah.
Want to push it in that way. From the industry itself absorbing it, I think they'll absorb it with open arms, because if you have a message that is clear and concise and cogent, that details what a mortgage professional needs to enable him or her to do a much better job, they're going to grab it. And whether or not it comes from myself or Brad, or whether it comes from you or Rick or wherever, I don't know where Kevin went, but well, Kevin would be on the receiving end of it. I wish we could ask him, but he's not on the screen with us at the moment.
Kevin's having some internet problems, I think. Otherwise, we definitely would have heard from him by now, I promise. Oh, there he is. Kevin, you're with us. Okay, we thought we lost you there for a second. But I want to go to Brad now. Same question, Brad. What's been the impact, or what will be the impact of content marketing, where some would argue the lines get blurred a little bit between journalism and marketing and whatnot?
There's always kind of been that, and National Mortgage News, yes, we have our voices section, and the rules around the voices section is you can write the article, it can't be a commercial for your and I've always had a loose interpretation of it anyway, which is if you have a product and you mention your product in the context of the article itself, that was fine.
Yeah, I would just interject there, Brad, as someone who's written 100 or 200 of those contributed articles over my career. Mr. Grant's done the same. I would say there are publications that do it very well, and will come back and edit the article or be very careful. And there are some in the past that have maybe taken whatever you can give them. And, I will say it's getting a little more stringent, which would be surprising, I imagine, based on the other conversations. But there's definitely, I'm sure you guys, and that's going to lead me into my next question. I'm sure you guys have seen some bylined contributions that came straight from the website or the collateral marketing. So go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, no, I think our guidelines generally are, we want first crack at it. I don't think we have we want exclusivity pretty much these days. We want the first crack at it. I don't think there's an issue about having it on your website after we've had our crack at it. I don't think we totally police that either. Not normally my area of policing anyhow. I'm just the guy who will edit some of this stuff.
Yeah, Glenn McCollum handles voices over there. Does a very nice job of it too. All that.
Yes. Glenn does. Glenn is the unsung hero of National Mortgage News.
There you go. He's the glue that keeps it together, I've heard.
Yes.
All right, guys, I'm going to come at you with this one. Phil, we're going to start with you. Tell us about the craziest story or article or feature you've ever had to report on or write.
Oh, crazy. I would say I'm going to go way, way back to early in my career in the late 1980s when I was at the American Bankers Association's magazine. And this was during the Cold War. And apparently there was a Soviet bank, I don't recall the name, and if I did, I probably couldn't pronounce it, that had a branch in New York City. And I said to my editor, I'd like to do an article about this. And he looked at me and said, the Soviets have a bank in New York City. And they did. And I called them, and they were very, very nice. I came over to their office, spoke with whoever was the executive officer there. And we did this article about the Soviet bank in New York. I think it was the only American branch of this bank. And it was an explanation of how the Soviet banking system operated, which of course was very different from the US system. And for me, it was one of the things I love to do as a journalist is to find stories that the other people are not writing. And That story got a lot of positive response when it was published in the ABA Banking Journal.
Wow. I did not realize the Soviet Union had a bank in New York City. That floored me right, that alone. But, Brad, tell us your topper here. What's the craziest story or article, or what's your crazy story through the course of your career?
A certain future president of the United States decided to go into the mortgage business. Mm-hmm. And it was the press conference was held at Trump Tower, but it was right after Barron was born. And 90% of the media that was there was Entertainment Tonight and those people. And the bulk of the questions during the press conference were, how's Melania? How's the baby? Very little on mortgage or real estate. And Ellie Mae, the guy from Ellie Mae was working with Trump Mortgage to get them online. He came up to me and said afterwards, we'll get you time with him alone, which they did. But that was probably the craziest thing I've ever dealt with. I did do a brief years ago, once again, during the go-go days, of this chicken franchisor going into the mortgage business.
That kind of speaks for itself. That's its own punchline right there, Brad, I think.
Yeah.
Rick Grant had a question for you guys as well. Rick,
I do. Just one last question. I know we got to wrap up soon. But first, Brad, I want to thank you. You called me a colleague earlier in this. You were actually more of a mentor to me. You trained me up in this business, so thank you. But Phil, I didn't get a chance to hear your answer to the standards that you set for yourself when you write stories, because I know you take a different approach, and you're one of the most prolific reporters we have in the industry right now. So how do you approach that?
Well, very much the way that Brad mentioned, in terms of having multiple sources, having people that you feel are the most respected in the industry, particularly if it's a major trend story going on. But I also want to write a story that is interesting, because so much in the way of B2B journalism in general, and mortgage journalism in particular, is not interesting. It's kind of monotonous, I'm sorry to say. And I want to give people a story that they would be interested in reading and they would not see someplace else. As I mentioned, the Soviet bank is something you hadn't seen elsewhere. Another, it wasn't a crazy story, it was actually a very interesting story, was an interview with, his name I believe was Jake Pavlik. He was one of the contestants on The Bachelor, the reality TV show. He's actually a commercial mortgage banker out of and I got an interview with him about, and it was in National Mortgage Professional, about his work in the commercial side of the industry. So this is something that you're not going to be seeing in the other publications. And I do other writing besides mortgage banking. I cover the Westchester and Fairfield County, Connecticut region for company, and I also do work for other publications around New England and across the country. So it's a very big challenge to write the stories that the other people are not writing, because we're all covering Freddie Mac on Thursday. We're all covering the NBA on Wednesday morning. We're all covering the Fed every month or every other month, whenever the committee gets together. But the real challenge is to get to the stories that are unique, that are not being written both by our competition in the mortgage trade and with the wider industry as a whole, and to get it out there. And also, I'm a very big believer in using social media to blow my own horn, because as mentioned earlier, I used to be a public relations executive. I ran my own agency. I still do my own PR for a lot of my personal endeavors. And if people follow me on social media, they're going to see a lot of Phil Hall videos and a lot of Phil Hall articles. And I joke about it that the world is demanding more Phil Hall videos, so I have to meet
Phil, I'm going to add for those who may be watching, if you haven't had a chance, we're going to include some links to your podcast. What is the title of your podcast again? I see your face on LinkedIn, and I jump right in, and I almost never.
I have two podcasts, believe it. I have a business podcast called West Fair Business Buzz, which is published by the West Fair Communications.
Right.
And I have the online movie show, which is a movie-focused podcast. And the 5th season of that's going to be starting October 12th. So you find they're all archived on SoundCloud. The online, just go to soundcloud.com/online movie show, and it's all there.
And we will be putting links to that. I didn't want to cut you off completely, but I had to mention that I think it's the West Fair that you put on LinkedIn, and I will jump into that from time to time. I recognize the background behind you, in fact, from that. So
well, that's not the podcast. That's actually the video conversations. I do both an audio podcast and a video.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, obviously, Rick said it. Prolific is the word. So we're going to include some links to that in here. Check him out, guys. He's an entertaining and versatile guy. But I didn't want to cut you off completely, though. Continue, Phil.
I was talking. I think I got my point across that it's very important for journalists in this industry, in any industry, to use social media to share their work and to build a community and answer questions about the work. I put out articles and people are a lot of times very complimentary and a lot of times tell me I have no talent, but it goes with the territory, and I respond to everyone who has something to say to me, nice or not so nice.
That's commendable and uncommon in this day and age. So I'd like to go into that more, but I think at this point we're starting to run out of time. So I'd like to thank our guests today. It's been an honor to have you guys on here. Brad Finkelstein. Brad, in the show notes, if someone wants to reach out to you, we'll include some information. But what's the best way, if someone would like to contact you, what's the best way to get to you?
Okay, it's Bradley, BRADLEY, Finkelstein, FINKELSTEIN, at Horizon, ARIZENT.com.
Outstanding, Brad. Thanks for joining us. And Phil, again, we'll include some links as well. But if someone wants to reach you directly, what's the best way of going about that?
Send me an email at phil, phil.hall, HALL, at live.com.
Outstanding. And thank you both again. And as always, my cohorts, Rick Grant and the amazingly silent Kevin Breeland. We may have to do our very own episode on that. He's not the best color commentator in the game for nothing, folks. With that, you guys probably don't know, but we record this on an old 2nd generation iPad, and oh God, it's been on mute the whole time. Rick, can you fix this and take us home?